In a little bit, I'm going to have the SCT members stand, but with a lot of other people standing, that'll be confusing right now. If you have your document, you will see our report is what's called the goldenrod color, and we put some on your table if you got a colored docket, or if you printed it off the web, it says goldenrod on it. And what I would like to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through what we did as the SCT, the Strategic Coordinating Team of Presbytery, since we've met on September 20th. Give you an idea of some of the assumptions that guided us, some of the biblical principles that guided us, the process, and then our recommendations. And you'll note that in the business meeting of the Presbytery, you will be asked to vote on one motion. There are 3 other recommendations that you'll be asked to view as a first reading. And those really aren't debatable. Well, they aren't debatable, but you can ask questions about those. But hopefully we can get a lot of that work done now. And the other members of SCT will be presenting on their reports also. But if you would look, there's a cover letter. If you turn to the next page of your report, where at the top it says, Finding a Better Way, Update and Recommendations. I wanted to take you through kind of how we began each meeting. We began meeting immediately. The SCT met for 6 Thursdays, almost in a row, for 5 hours every time. Since October, we met from October the 4th through November the 15th, and had 1 Thursday off. So we have worked as hard as we know how to work for the service of this presbytery. And we began with some scriptures. And I've summarized how they accumulated over the time. Psalm 127, we realized, that's the one, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain, unless the Lord keeps watch over the city, the watchmen, and the version I memorized, or the guards stay awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to bed, eating the bread of anxious toil, for the Lord gives to his beloved rest or sleep. And we said we are humbly dependent on God's work of building us, God's work of building through us as God's workers, and God's work of protecting through us as God's guard. We realize God builds the church. This is God's church, and we realize that. We also realize that we need to walk from darkness into light. Someone has said, what you hide owns you. And so we built on 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. If we walk in the light as he is in the light, the blood of Christ cleanses us, and we have fellowship with one another. We read the Book of Order every time. We read the Foundations section on Christ as the head of the church and his continuing work in the world, and we realize we're joining with the Lord. We read Philippians 2, look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. We read Psalm 126, which talks about those who sow in tears will reap in joy. And that psalm talks about both the revival that can come from God's active intervention and our providential waiting and serving faithfully as we prepare for God's work. And then 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love. We live in the confidence of the love of Christ. We framed our task in point number 2, and I'll just read this. The Presbytery of Los Ranchos is seeking thoughtful ways to respond to congregations who are struggling with their affiliation with the PCUSA and possibly with their fellowship and participation in the presbytery. But we are also here because many congregations are simply struggling with ministry in our changing culture and context. At this moment in our presbytery's history, we have the opportunity to be intentional in coming alongside our congregations, pastors, and staff by making good use of this conflict to bring clarity in a variety of ways. This will not happen automatically. Our work as the strategic coordinating team is both to model and to propose a better way to guide us through this time. Your SCT is a broad group of people. We were elected by this body. We represent congregations. We are elders, teaching elders. We are ruling elders. And we realize if we can model it, maybe that can help it go forward. And then we described our work this way. Our work is to engage the tension inherent in our presbytery at this time. That means we will endeavor to enable congregations of the presbytery both to seek spiritual vitality in and among our congregations and also assist them, if they feel so led, to discern their future denominational connection in a way that is mutually beneficial to the congregation and the presbytery. A primary goal would be for all to discover and develop vital ministry partnerships going forward that can witness to the love of Christ even in spite of the significant differences in theology and ecclesiology. Some of this will become more clear as we go forward. So that's how we framed our work. Well, who are we? This is a good point. If I could ask the members of the SCT to stand. I won't introduce them by name. No need to applaud, but just stand so people can see who you are. We've scattered ourselves among all the tables so that we can be able to listen to you later on in our conversation. Quite a group, huh? Yeah. Don't get rowdy now. Don't get rowdy. Yeah, I know. He's in it. He really is. And, of course, we had Tom Kramer and Benita with us. Like I said, we met more than 30 hours, and we grew a great deal in the time of that meeting. We went through a process of building relationships. I believe truth travels on relational rails. I believe the only way to work some of these issues out is to understand one another's stories. And so we began to hear one another's stories and appreciate where our convictions and our experiences and how those have guided us. We did talk about our fears and concerns, and we're going to ask you around the tables to share what are your fears, concerns, hopes, dreams about this. And we stated very clearly what we needed to feel safe. I have felt safe ever since I was able to share on September 20th. And again, everybody's different, how they perceived it. Some didn't feel safe, some felt very safe. But we felt very safe in the SCT, and I am very excited about that people entered into that. We used a number of resources, a book from the Harvard Negotiation Project called Difficult Conversations, where basically every conversation we have has three elements. There's the what happened conversation. Then there's the feeling conversation. Well, this is how I feel about that. And then there's the identity conversation. What am I telling myself as a result of having this conversation with you? And those are very deep and complex issues. But we've begun to listen to one another and understand that we often are so reactive because we have no idea that there's several layers of things that are happening. We also used the 5 dysfunctions of a team pyramid, which talks about trust through transparency is the basis of our pyramid going forward. And then that was the main one we looked at. But that's an excellent book. You can use in a variety of settings. And then we have some other resources that we haven't really used, but we have on our radar about discernment. We divided into 5 working groups based on the motion. And by the way, a copy of the motion is embedded in your document somewhere. It's at the kind of the back page just before the reporting groups. It's in a later page. But anyway, we divided around the 5 groups. I will basically be presenting group number 5 to you, but you will also hear from the other groups. Now, number 5 on the outline here, without presuming to usurp the presbytery's authority. We're very aware that we're just a servant of the presbytery. We together are the presbytery. Nobody replaces us. We have the power, the authority, the responsibility. So we do not presume to be speaking for the presbytery, but we want to share with you a number of assumptions that undergirded our recommendations. I'm in a lot of situations, and oftentimes I want to know, well, how did you get there? Tell me what's underneath. What's the assumption that is driving your conclusions? So we dared to write these assumptions, and it was based on Philippians, be of one mind. And we said as an SCT, where are we of one mind? And that was not easy. But what we have in front of you, literally every word of this document has been vetted by all of us, and every one of us felt that we could at least concur with these, and I think on the whole, wholeheartedly support these. First, we want to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and demonstrate Christ's redeeming love within the bounds of our presbytery, Orange and Los Angeles counties, and beyond. Well, that, above all, is our gospel focus. B, we recognize that the congregations, teaching and ruling elders, and staffs of the PCUSA and Presbytery of Los Ranchos sometimes differ so greatly in their interpretation of Scripture and practice of faith that it strains our fellowship and distracts from our ministry effectiveness. That's just naming it. It is a reality. Once we name it, we can begin to deal with it. If we avoid it or deny it, it just trips us up. The next point, we are committed to respecting one another and enabling one another to minister in ways that are true to our consciences. We understand that genuine followers of Jesus Christ deeply differ on some things, and we cannot question one another's commitment to Jesus Christ. We can struggle with one another's stands or interpretations, but we must understand that honest people have different opinions. That is an area where I think all of us continue to grow. We would like to apply to congregations the principle of G2.0105 footnote 11, which concerns the conscience of individuals. That is, we would encourage all congregations to concur with or passively submit to the vote and wisdom of the majority. If they are unable to do neither, which is concur with or passively submit, the presbytery will be gracious in allowing such congregations and presbyters with strong issues of conscience to pursue peaceable withdrawal through dismissal to another reformed body in accordance with the trust clause. And we did get that language from the San Gabriel Presbytery, a policy of theirs, and we want to note that for you to see. But we realized that we don't believe in coercion, and we want to explore ways to support people when they really disagree or really struggle. There has to be a process, though, of that having integrity. E, we would like the presbytery to allow churches to be in missional partnership regardless of denominational affiliation. One thing that struck us was we talk about being connectional, but we don't know how to do that very well. And so we began to brainstorm, and that will come up in some of our group reports, some ideas that came up there. But we're realizing that there's a whole new definition to ecumenism, and that working together in a local region can be done in fruitful ways, even though you may have to find some space for the deepest issues of conscience. Then we expect a congregation considering dismissal to another reformed body to recognize the ongoing impact and implications that will have on the presbytery and its congregations. We also expect a dismissed congregation to provide appropriate financial support for the Presbytery of Los Ranchos in order to minimize the disruption to the presbytery's mission and ministry. We have to realize that it is a tragic situation. We struggled with using the word divorce, but we realize that these kind of things can be difficult, and there must be a way of transitioning that does not compromise the mission and ministry of the presbytery or the congregation. And then we are committed to doing everything possible to settle disputes about property and other matters relationally and in good faith, rather than through judicial proceedings in the courts of the church or by initiating settlement in civil courts. In our Presbyterian system, one person can bring a case, can do all of that. And one person can hold everybody in a captive situation. Our desire, of course, that can never be closed down. We wouldn't close that down. That is our Presbyterian way. But our desire is to do everything up front now so that everybody says, well, yes, we've agreed to all that, and yes, we will honor this, and we will honor congregations in these struggles. So the first motion that will come before you, and by the way, you're going to get a chance to discuss this around tables and then feedback to us. The first motion that will come before you is that the strategic coordinating team recommends that the Presbytery of Los Ranchos enter a season of discernment that includes reflection, study, and resolution encompassing every congregation's missional vision and purpose, and gives them the opportunity to affirm their commitment to the Presbytery of Los Ranchos and the PCUSA, or to enter a discernment process regarding their denominational affiliation. The shorthand for this is our presbytery recommends a season of discernment. We are asking every congregation to engage in this, because the starting point is, what's your missional vision and purpose? It's very clear to us that just leaving a denomination to go somewhere else and die is not wise. It is not strategic. It is running away. And it can be just a smokescreen. The denominational conflict can be a smokescreen that diverts you from paying attention to the really important issues. We also think every congregation needs to engage. However, you'll see in the rationale that once every congregation engages and goes through some of the conversations and processes we're going to recommend to you or present to you, provide opportunities for you, a congregation may say, you know, we're just fine with all this denominational stuff. That's not on our radar. and then it's totally fine. There would basically be an opt-in at that point going forward if a congregation says, we are struggling, we'd like to do further discernment. Does that make sense? Everyone engages in a discernment process about their missional vision and purpose, and then they can decide, and you see that at the end there. We recognize and affirm, about 5 lines up, that after due consideration, a congregation may decide whether or not to engage in a discernment process that involves denominational affiliation. But in all cases, our aim is for every congregation to stay engaged in the presbytery's process so that all congregations may benefit from the wisdom and perspective of others. Participation of all our congregations will ensure healthy engagement with the issues before us. We also want to keep all lines of communication going forward as we continue to minister together in this region. We have some ideas of the elements of the season of discernment. We will provide some conversations in January. I actually don't know if those dates are finalized here, so I need to get that sometime. When you're talking, I'll come back with those. But we thought with the presbytery there would be conversations January through April, really hitting it pretty hard in January. And then congregations, you can begin immediately. You could begin as of the last presbytery meeting, but with focused engagement with the presbytery. And then there is an idea that if the congregations move toward a sense of we are, some of us are thinking of going, many of us are thinking of staying or whatever, there would be sort of a straw vote indication in June. That way the presbytery leadership can have an idea what will be the impact, if any, on our presbytery as congregations are wrestling with their decisions. Part of the reason why we can do this all together is there's this churning in the air. There are congregations that are struggling, and you can deny it, or you can try to push it aside, or whatever, or you can just say, well, let's recognize this. And our feeling is that in terms of Friedman and Steinke and the anxious system, when you can walk in the light, the anxiety drops, and people make much better decisions when they're not afraid or they don't feel coerced, and hopefully can stay engaged. And then there would be an opportunity to evaluate over the summer where the different congregations are. Now, some of this is building it while we're flying it. I mean, literally, we gave a lot of hours that didn't just come in meetings. I don't know any presbytery committee that's met 30 hours in 6 weeks. So I'm kind of proud of that in a hopefully a holy way. But there are things that are not fully resolved yet. But if you get the spirit of this, then we can move forward. Now, there are several other motions, beginning now, number 7. There are 3 other items that will be brought before you as a first reading. These flow out of the other assumptions that we made. And the first is that the strategic coordinating team recommends that the presbytery appoint a task force under the direction of the SCT to develop new policies and procedures for congregations and presbyteries to use when considering a request for dismissal. There's a sense with all those property issues that were coming along and all, something wasn't quite right. There's a feeling that those weren't quite right, but we didn't feel it was up to us to figure out how to do that and take that one on. So we're recommending presbytery do that. You'll see the makeup of that is sort of like a congregational nominating committee, so to speak. We'd like 2 people from the SCT, 1 from trustees, and then 4 from presbytery at large. And then we have an ex officio of our presbytery staff. We actually do have a slate of names, but we haven't asked the people yet, except the SCT members, and we didn't feel it was appropriate to bring that to you yet. We wanted you to have the concept first. The next point, which is 8, a third motion for first reading. I realize if you don't have the paper in front of you, this is tough. But the third motion, which again is just a first reading this time, not for vote, is that we would recommend, the SCT would recommend we suspend the current procedural guidelines on property issues. Keith has said many times, the Book of Order currently has all the necessary items for congregations and presbyteries to walk through things. It doesn't have all the clarity of specific processes, but it certainly has all the principles in place. So the idea would be we would suspend the current ones, and that's a vote that would come before you in January. Now, again, I'll give you the dates after I check all my signals at your talking break. But the SCT would also request that all congregations and presbytery representatives engage fully and in good faith, but that the SCT would request and expect that a congregation would not approach the presbytery with requests for dismissal until we've all engaged in the season of discernment. And then the fourth motion, again, which would just be a first reading, is that the SCT recommends that with the council of SCT and COM, the Presbytery Council develop and equip a team of people to serve as a commission to work with congregations who may request dismissal or assistance in the discernment process. Our Presbytery already has a response team for congregations. This would likely expand that. I don't fully understand how that would work, but again, the idea would be that we would develop and work with that team. Okay, so let me have the members of our team report here for our working group number 1. And you'll see the reports now. The motion is there. And then I think it's on page 6. You have the working group reports. Lisa Smith, who was elected to our committee on the night of September 20th. She got the baptism by fire and did it well.